A huge NIL deal and some great questions from Pitt fans as Pitt moves through the second week of training camp. We got a lot to get to, so let's jump right into it with the Morning Pitt here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. All right, it's the Friday edition of the Morning Pitt here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com. You know the website is right there below, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. The most comprehensive source of Pitt sports news on the internet, football, basketball, and recruiting. You find it all at Panther-Lair.com, and message boards to discuss everything going on in the world of Pitt sports with your closest Pitt fan friends. I think it's the best online community of Pitt fans that you're going to find, and it's right there at Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. We always ask you to go check it out, and if you haven't done it yet, I don't know what you're waiting for, and we always ask you to do something else too. Like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's no reason not to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel unless you don't like this video, in which case we'll try and do better the next time. But if you do enjoy this video, you should like it. You should just click it now because you're probably going to enjoy it because we got a lot of great stuff to talk about here today. First, though, I got to tell you, of course, about Homefield Apparel.com. I mean, you know about Homefield by now. I mean, you've been hearing me talk about Homefield forever. You've been seeing me wear this shirt. Look at that thing. I mean, I feel like I should just wait here because that is just it's a sensational logo. You know, it's a classic. I don't even want to say vintage because vintage sort of implies that it's old. It's classic. It's traditional. It's instantly recognizable. If you saw someone walking around, never mind the words where it says Pittsburgh and Panthers. If you just saw someone walking around with that logo, you would instantly know that they were supporting Pitt or they were repping Pitt. And that's the kind of thing you can find in all kinds of different logos at Homefield. Homefieldapparel.com. They make great high-quality shirts. They're super comfortable. They hold their shape. They're a nice fit. They're a great fit, actually. And they have the best logos and marks that you're going to find in anybody who sells college sports gear, t-shirts, sweatshirts, hats. Not this hat. I need to get a Homefield hat, actually, to sort of rep that, too, because they're awesome. What they've got there with a classic look. It's high quality stuff with great designs. I mean, what more can you ask for? Homefieldapparel.com. And if you go there now, you get, it pops up right on time, the promo code LAIR23. I'm going to move that over so you can see the 23. You see it? LAIR23. Use that promo code on your first order at Homefield. And you can see the logo. I mean, like, I've got this thing on, but look at those. Those were great. That's going to cycle through a few more times. You're going to see it. That Golden Panthers logo is chef's kiss, right? 15% off your first order when you use the promo code LAIR23. Go do it now. I mean, like, they're supporting us. They're supporting the podcast. You should support them. And it's not like you're just doing it out of the goodness of your heart. You get some sweet gear to wear. Some sweet shirts, some sweet sweatshirts. They have joggers, which I've learned are actually like sweatpants, but they're called joggers. There must be some kind of difference. I don't know what it is because they just look cool. They got great hats. They got all kinds of stuff. And not just for Pitt. Like, you might have your fill of Pitt stuff, you know? You might want to get something for another school, either for fun or because you have an allegiance to another school as well. Homefield Apparel, they've got deals with like 150 colleges across the country. Go to homefieldapparel.com. Use that promo code LAIR23. You'll get 15% off your first order. I can't recommend it enough. You're going to watch me do this video the whole time. You're going to be looking at that Panther right there. You see him? I should almost lean off to the side so you can look at that the whole time. And by the end of this video, you're going to be like, I need that shirt. So go. You might as well just keep this video playing. Open it in another tab. Go to homefieldapparel.com and buy this shirt from their Pitt collection. And use the promo code LAIR23 to get 15% off your first order. All right, so it's our Friday edition of the Morning Pitt. You know, we always do the mailbag. We got some great questions. I can't wait to get into it. I've been jotting down notes and preparing because there's some really good questions and things to discuss. But we got to talk about NIL, Pitt's big NIL news that came out yesterday. We can't not talk about it. I can't in good conscience put a video out this morning and not talk about that. I can't wait until Monday to talk about it. We got to talk about it now. And it's a huge deal. Alliance 412 announces a team-wide NIL deal. Every scholarship player on Pitt's roster is signed on to this thing. They're all getting paid. And there are obligations, charitable appearances, things like that. But they're all getting paid. This is a deal that is worth 7 figures annually with every scholarship player on the roster getting 5 figures. And there's varying amounts for different players. It's a tiered system and all of that, as you might expect. But we're talking about a minimum of 5 figures. We won't get into exact numbers, but I don't think we need to get into exact numbers. When I tell you this is a 7-figure NIL deal that's worth 5 figures to every scholarship player on the roster, that's big time. I mean, that is big time. I think that's the kind of thing that if I told you there was a school that did a 7-figure NIL deal and every one of their scholarship players is getting 5 figures annually, if I told you that, you would assume, what would you assume? Texas? Georgia? Ohio State? USC? I mean, that's what you would assume, right? Texas Tech reportedly had one of these things a year ago. I don't know if it actually came to fruition or not, but you would expect that. Well, guess what? Pitt is playing in that arena. Okay, I don't think the significance of this can be overstated. And judging by the reaction on the message boards of Panther-Lair.com and the reaction on social media, I don't think that the significance of it is being overlooked. I think Pitt fans are impressed by this. And what's really interesting is it seems to be mobilizing the fan base. You know, there's a lot of talk online, a lot of talk on the message boards and on social media about fans getting involved with Alliance 412 now that they see that it's for real. You know, now that they see it's a real thing that's actually going to have significant impact on the team and on the players. Fans are getting involved because they want to participate, they want to contribute. And it's really interesting to see. It's impressive to see, and I think the ramifications are going to be pretty extensive. I think this is going to have some reach, and I think it'll impact recruiting. I think it'll impact the players on the team. I think it'll impact fan engagement. It's a big step. It's a big step for Alliance 412. It's a big step for Pitt football, for the athletic department, because I think they're just going to keep growing from here. You know, basketball and who knows what into other sports, but this is a major move. I mean, this puts Pitt in a different, like I say, a different arena. I mean, it really does change the game for Pitt to the benefit of the student athletes. It is ultimately what it comes down to. It's to the benefit of the players, but I think it sends a real message about how serious and committed Pitt and the entities operating on its behalf are about moving this thing, about really kind of seizing the opportunity that the current situation provides. And I don't think I could do a whole episode. I probably could do a whole episode of the Morning Pit talking about this, but it would basically just be me saying over and over again, this is big, this is big, this is huge, because it is. I mean, if your reaction when you heard this was, wow, I don't think you're wrong. It's pretty big. And I think there's more where this kind of thing came from. I think Alliance 412 is working on a lot of things with Pitt and with the players. I think they're building toward a lot of things, and it's going to be fun to watch. I think it really is. So that was really big news that came out yesterday. And like I say, I felt like we had to talk about it here. Now let's jump into some of the mailbag questions. We'll start with a few that were left over from last week before we move on to the questions from this week. Pin Engineer 12 asked one that's an interesting question. Says, if this team underachieves this season with 5, 6, maybe 7 wins, what happened? Don't project injuries. What went wrong? And if this team overachieves 10, 11, 12 wins, same question. What happened? If we're not projecting injuries, I'm going to go with the simplest, most basic answer, and it's basically the same answer for both questions of what went wrong and what went right. And it's a passing game. If they only win 5, 6, 7 games, and I don't think that's likely, but if that's what happens, I think it'll be because the passing game never really improved from last year and either stayed the same that it was a year ago or got worse. Conversely, if they win 10, 11, 12, which I also think is probably unlikely, I feel like 8 and 9 is probably that sweet spot, which is something of a sweet spot for this program as a whole. And it certainly would be a sweet spot for this year. If they end up in that 10, 11, 12 range somehow, it's going to be the passing game. It's going to be Phil Dracovic stepping up and having the best season of his career. It's going to be Frank Cignetti calling a masterful game plan to maximize Dracovic's strengths while also developing the run game. And then, obviously things like the defense coming together and whatnot. But it'll be about the passing game. It really will. Any success or failure this team has is going to ultimately come down to the passing game, which is going to sound, which you could probably say about last year too. And you could probably say about 2021, as a matter of fact, because all the successes they had there where they got to 11 wins, it was because of the passing game. There were other factors, of course. The defense was really good in 2021. But the primary factor that drove an 11-win season in an ACC championship was the passing game, and the primary factor that had Pitt at 8-4 last year in the regular season as opposed to 10-2 and playing for the ACC title again, the primary factor was the passing game. The last two seasons are as stark of examples as we will ever need, and as strong of evidence as we will ever need to the fact that the quarterback and the passing game dictate your success. Because Kenny Pickett did, and Keaton Slovis did. And the contrast between those two seasons and those two quarterback performances and those two passing game performances, that tells the story. It really does. And this year's story will be told just the same. And there'll be other factors. There'll be games where the defense wins it or games where the defense loses it. There'll be games where the running game takes over. There will be other factors. But on the whole, this team's record will be determined by what Phil Dracovic does, what Frank Cignetti does. For better or for worse. And I don't know if it's going to be the better or the worse. But, like I said, I think the sweet spot is probably right around 8 or 9. But that's what it's going to come down to. And I hate to give a cop-out answer. It's the same thing I've been saying all offseason, but I've been saying it all offseason because I believe it, and I think it's actually the truth. Potter County native asks, will Panarduzzi kiss Ben Sauls before a game-winning field goal in a big game? Well, you remember, I don't think he kissed him before that game-winning field goal. He kissed him after he missed a field goal earlier. Chris Blewett, we're talking about, of course, in the Clemson game in 2016. He kissed him after he missed a field goal earlier in the game. He didn't kiss him before the game-winning attempt, I don't think, unless I'm misremembering that. But I feel like it was after the miss. So Sauls, who has only missed like one field goal in his last 8 games or 9 games or 7 games or whatever it is, 9, I think. I forget the exact number. He made 15 out of his last 16. I think that's the stat that we're going with. Sauls may not find himself in that situation very often where he has missed a field goal and needs a little kiss, but that would be the scenario, I would say. H2P_JC, and I should have answered this one last week because it was a little more topical last week. He asked, what is an official offer? Why do we keep seeing players tweeting about these? Have we ever seen a scenario where a verbally committed recruit did not receive an official offer? So you might have seen this last week. So last Friday would have been the 4th, Thursday would be the 3rd, Wednesday the 2nd, Tuesday was the 1st. So you might have seen last Tuesday a bunch of recruits in the 2024 recruiting class tweeting out official offers. And what that is, it's sort of a carryover or the 2023 version of what used to be the first day that schools could send a written scholarship offer. That you couldn't send a scholarship offer in writing to a recruit until August 1st before his senior year. That was always the big day. Now it's evolved into sending graphics and edits and stuff on Twitter that recruits can then tweet out and get a lot of likes and retweets and all that kind of stuff is what it's evolved to. But that's where that comes from, is the first day you could send a written scholarship offer. So that's what that is. Has there ever been a time where a committed recruit didn't get a written scholarship offer? Maybe none that come to mind from past years, but that actually makes me think of a few things I need to look into with the current recruiting class. We'll just have to leave that there and see what we can find out. Let's move on to some questions we got this week. We had a lot of good ones here, so I want to start jumping in. Pitt_Panther17, and remember, all these questions are posted on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com. Every Tuesday or Wednesday, I put out a call for mailbag questions, and it's all on that premium message board, the Between Fifth and Forbes message board. That's where I put all, that's where we get all these questions. It's in a thread, and then we bring them to the to the Morning Pit. So if you want to participate in the mailbag, you got to be on the message boards. I talk about them all the time, that you can talk to other Pitt fans. Well, you can also talk to me. Well, I'm on there talking with Pitt fans too, and you can also, taking mailbag questions. So if you have a question, that's the place to do it. So Pitt Panther 17 says, if you had to pick one of the four, which freshman receiver do you see making the biggest impact to the offense this season? And that's a great question, and something I feel like we've gone back and forth on a lot this offseason. I feel like Jim and I talk about it every week on the live show on Wednesday nights. I think we talked about it just this past week. We were ranking the four freshmen in terms of most likely to least likely to see the field this year. We're pretty convinced that at least one, probably two, and maybe even three of them will burn their red shirts. It seems unlikely that all four will. It's probably most likely that two will. I think at least one definitely will. Who is that one, though? I don't know. Because some days I hear all these good things about Kenny Johnson. And, 2 or 3 times now in training camp, Zion Fowler-L's name has been mentioned. Lamar Seymour has come up. I think they tweeted a video of him making a big catch the other day, which is always a good sign that he's impressing the coaches if he's getting a little social media love. And then Israel Polk, who hasn't gotten talked about as much this month, was talked about a lot in the spring after he enrolled in January. So if I had to pick one, like if I had to guess, if I had to name one guy that I think is most likely from the freshmen, I would probably say Kenny Johnson. The only thing that holds Kenny Johnson back, I think, is the fact that he didn't enroll in January. So he's really just in his first camp as opposed to enrolling in January and having a chance to participate in spring camp. He wishes he was able to. He just wasn't able to pull it off. He told me that in the spring. He was really disappointed that he couldn't get there in January because he wanted to be part of the team and get started. I still think he might be – it's too early for me to say that, he's the most talented guy in the group, but I think he is I think he's got a chance to ascend to that level. And I think he might be the guy who's most likely to get on the field. But I also, I think that, that might change every day with who's making plays and who's stepping up. So it's a tough call. It's still early in camp to get a sense of that. He'd probably be my pick right now, but we'll see where we are in a week. This is interesting. H2P_JC says, 2-part question. Have you heard anything about how the wide receiver targets that we missed out on are performing in camp, specifically Hakeem Williams and Dante Cephas? And what are you hearing about what we considered the top 2023 recruits for Pitt thus far? Guys like Jordan Bass, Isaiah Neal, and Shadarian Harrison. So Hakeem Williams and Dante Cephas are interesting. I had to go kind of check around on some of the message boards. I went and looked at the Florida State Rivals site, and I went and looked at Penn State Rivals site just to see what they were saying there. I mean, I'm not tied into Florida State's practices or Penn State's practices. It seems like Hakeem, and again, it's early in training camp, but from what I sort of read, the general perception of the fans and some of the things that are being reported about him is that looks good and is playing well, but hasn't necessarily separated himself to the point where you think he's going, a lock to play this year, to burn his red shirt. I mean, he may end up burning his red shirt playing 6 games or something like that, but it doesn't seem at this point, and again, we're only in the second week of August, so a lot can change over the next few weeks, let alone the next few months, but it doesn't seem at this point like the expectations are all that high for his contributions as a freshman. Now, Florida State is a talented team, but I think the expectation when you get a player like Hakeem Williams is that he's going to come in and light it up from the very start, be one of the best players on the team, and that doesn't seem to be the case thus far. He did enroll in January. He's been there for a while, but seemingly not lighting the world on fire so far in his Florida State career. Dante Cephas, not sure, sort of mixed reviews there. It doesn't seem like Penn State's staff is talking him up as much. And they are talking up other guys, but maybe not him as much. So, I think those were definitely 2 guys that were viewed as being locks to play early and often for Pitt this year. Right now, both are sort of up in the air as far as what they're going to be able to do at the schools they ultimately went to, Florida State and Penn State. So, kind of interesting. I mean, I think we'll sort of have a bit of peripheral vision on those guys over the course of this season, see what they do. And if Hakeem Williams makes a big play or Dante Cephas makes a big play, I'm sure Pitt fans will notice. But right now, it doesn't look like either one is quite separated himself, at least from reports. And as far as the top 2023 recruits for Pitt thus far, guys like Jordan Bash, Isaiah Neal, Shadarian Harrison. Neal obviously had an advantage of being here in the spring, but at the same time, there's a bit of a logjam at defensive tackle. I'm not sure what his role is going to end up being this year. Jordan Bass is a guy who's gotten a lot of publicity this week. He's gotten a lot of good talk from the coaches. He even came out and talked to the media himself on Tuesday, I think it was. I put him in my players who are getting hype from the first week of training camp. I talked about him on Wednesday's Morning Pitt, I think it was. So he's getting some hype. Shadarian Harrison looks like he can be a player, but again, another logjam at the position where they've got a lot of upperclassmen at corner right now. Next year, things are going to, just like a defensive tackle, next year at cornerback, things are going to open up really wide. And there's going to be a lot of opportunities for guys like Isaiah Neal and Shadarian Harrison to play a lot. Those guys might get on the field this year, but next year is really when you're going to look for them to shine. Let's see. PGH Sun J1325 says, 2 questions. How do you compare how the coaches feel about Jurkovec this preseason in comparison to how they talked about Keaton Slovis last year at this time? Is it about the same, more glowing? Interested to hear your recall on that. 2, do we think the freshman wide receiver hype is actually a good thing in regards to the 2023 season? To me, it's a bit of a red flag. They're getting so much hype. Is it that they're outperforming the older guys? But how good can they really be? Is it good comparatively, or are they actually ACC caliber players right now? Well, so I'll start with the wide receiver question. Is it, are they getting so much hype because they're outperforming the older guys? Like, keep in mind, there's only like 3 older guys on the team. Older experienced guys, and really it's kind of 2. Is Bub Means and Kanate Mumfield. Because Dejon Reynolds, even, coming in as a transfer from Florida, didn't really play that much at Florida. So you basically have like 2 older guys, another guy who's older in age and has some experience. Then you've got Javonte Royal, Chawabuko, and Addison Copeland. 3 players who have been around. Copeland and Wabuko are second-year players. Royal's been around for like 3 or 4 years. They haven't really played at all. And then you have the freshmen. So, they are getting a lot of talk because they're getting a lot of reps because they're, and seemingly making plays with those reps. Are they outplaying Means and Mumfield and Reynolds? Probably not. Are they outplaying Wabuko, Copeland and Royal? Maybe. But there's not that many older guys. I mean, how many guys did I just name there? I mean, there's 10 receivers on the team, and 40% of them are true freshmen. So, 10 receivers on the team, you could go, You could go 2 deep with 3 wide. You go 3 wide, 2 deep without getting to the freshmen, but that's it. So those guys are getting their reps. They're getting practice snaps. They're making plays, and so they are getting hype. And that was what that class was brought in to do, not necessarily to take over the wide receiver room in 2023, but it was brought in to add an influx of talent and numbers to a room that desperately needed both. And so that's what they've done. And, I do think it's a good thing that they're getting hype. I do think it's a good thing that they're making plays. I still think Bub Means and Kanate Mumfield are your top 2 receivers on this team, and don't ignore the fact that Bub Means has been getting some Twitter highlights put out there. He's making plays. He's having a good camp. He had a good spring. I think Bub Means is building on last season and building from last season, and looks like he's positioning himself to have a really good year this year. I think Kanate Mumfield is going to take a step forward from where he was last year. All of it's going to be dependent on the quarterback, and we'll talk about that in a second. But I think those guys are taking a step forward. But kind of after them, it's wide open. So, yeah, maybe Kenny Johnson is outplaying, whoever, Copeland and Royal or something. Okay, those guys don't have any experience. I mean, it's not a crazy notion. So I do think it's good if your youngest players on the team are stepping up and making plays and either pushing the older guys or passing the older guys. I think that's a good thing. You need talent, and you need talent at that position in particular. As to the, what was your word? How did you phrase it? How the coaches feel about Phil Jurkovec this preseason in comparison to how they talked about Slovis last year. So this is tricky. I feel like everyone, myself included, is more measured in how we talk about the quarterback situation this year than a year ago. And not that the coaches went over the top. I probably went over the top a year ago. they didn't necessarily go over the top, but I think they are more measured in how they talk about the quarterback situation this year, and careful not to go over the top. Not necessarily for any reason. They don't want to blow. They don't want Phil Dracovic to get a big head or something like that. I don't think it's like that. I think they want these guys to practice. They want them to play it out. They want them to compete. Drakovic's the starter. Christian Veer and Nate Yarnell are competing to be his backup, but they want all these guys to keep just working. They're not going to get crazy with the praise and all that stuff. They want to see him throw. And occasionally they'll talk about, they're all throwing the ball well right now. I think there is a general sense of Dracovic doing things like running the huddle, leading the offense better. We hear a lot of the talk about leadership and how he's doing a better job, and maybe they didn't have enough leadership last year and all this stuff. I don't know. I don't know about that as far as the comparison, but I do get a sense that they seem to be most impressed with that. But as far as how they're talking, I think they might be a bit more measured this season, but there's not too much that stands out to me in that regard. I think we're all being more measured about it, because last year, at least for me, I hyped up the quarterback who hadn't been really good in 2 years or 3 years, and it ended up not really working out. So maybe I'm being more measured in hyping up the quarterback who hasn't been really good in 2 or 3 years, and waiting to see how it works out. So that's kind of how I see it. I mean, I think they do have more confidence. Do they have more confidence in Dracovic now than they had in Slovis last year at this point? I don't know. Do they think that Dracovic can be better than Slovis ended up being? Yeah, I think they do. Are they right about that? I don't know. We'll find out. We'll find out in a few weeks. And then over the course of like 3 months after that. So we'll see. Look at that promo code that just popped up there. Homefield Apparel.com. 15% off your first order when you use promo code LAIR23. You got to do it. I mean, like, you've been looking at this shirt, right? It's awesome. It's awesome. You got to do it. You got to go get this shirt. You got to get to see some of the newest stuff they released in their new pick collection. It came out a few weeks ago. It's great stuff. And again, it's classic. I don't even like calling it like vintage or traditional. It's just classic. It's classically Pitt. And they have script stuff, and they have classic logos. They have the Golden Panther thing. When that promo image pops up there again, you'll see it on a sweet ringer tee. It's classic look, instantly recognizable, and some of the coolest Pitt gear that you're going to find. And when you go use that promo code LAIR23, you get 15% off your first order. You can't beat that. You can't beat it. A high quality product at a discount. HomefieldApparel.com. Go check it out. And then head over to Panther-Lair.com. Panther-Lair.com for all the latest Pitt sports coverage. We'll be at training camp again this morning, so we'll have lots of coverage from there. Videos, transcripts, practice highlights. You got to go check out the practice highlights from yesterday, actually. Some great stuff with the linebackers I think you're going to enjoy. You talk about Jordan Bass? Yeah, dude looks the part for sure. So go check all of that out. And then, of course, before you leave here, like this video and subscribe. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com to never miss any of our exclusive Pitt video content. We made it to the end of the week. We got one more practice to get through, but it's been fun all week on these morning pits. I appreciate you tuning in and keeping up with everything here. I hope you have a great Friday. Hope you have a great weekend, and we will be back with you again on Monday morning for the morning pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.